Mr. President, I was wrong on Friday. The calculations and the numbers I discussed with the body used the wrong percentage. I used 5% for virtual charter schools. It's 10%. 2 schools, 5% each. It's not 13,250 potential students at $98 million a year. It's 26,500 potential students at a total of $196 million a year. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. That's virtual students only. That doesn't include brick and mortar, so-called public charter schools. That could be, if they fulfilled their 10%, that could be another 26,500, or nearly $400 million a year. But the virtual charter schools cause me the most concern. And here's why. We're going to hand $7,400 per student to the brick and mortar charter schools. We're going to hand $7,400 per student to the virtual charter schools. Now, virtual charter schools don't have any buildings. They don't have any desks. They don't have any lockers. They don't have any cooks. They don't have any janitors. They don't have any security. They don't have any liability protection. They have teachers, but in vastly smaller numbers. As I said on Friday, Florida has 1 teacher, 1 instructor per 274 students. That's not very many for even if the full 26,500 students went to virtual charter schools. At the maximum, 6,500. If the entire 20% would leave the system, 6,500 positions would be lost in our traditional public schools. If we look at half and we say, okay, between brick and mortar charter schools and virtual charter schools, only 26,500 students will be lost out of the system. That's $200 million a year and over 3,000 positions. But let's not even assume there's going to be that many. Let's assume it's just 10,000 students. That's 1,234 traditional public school positions, according to the Department of Education. That's 1,234 public school teachers. That's 727, that's 1,234 public school positions, 727 educators, 456 service personnel, and 50 professional student support personnel. Why are we taking these risks with so many unknowns? Why are we taking these risks when we've never had a charter school and now we're going to have some? Why not put some reasonable limits on these virtual and brick and mortar charter schools? I mean, you look around the country, charter school results are mixed at best. Sure, there's some successes, but there's a whole lot of failures. You've heard me say here dozens of times, Ohio lost $4 billion. Nobody stood up to refute that. Nobody stood up and said, oh, wait a minute, they didn't lose $4 billion. You know why? Because they lost $4 billion. Through theft, through mismanagement, through lack of proper education of children, they've gone out of business. Poor facilities where the desks fall through the floor because the floorboards are so poor and so in disrepair, and because of discrimination. And the governing body for every virtual school, according to this bill, is itself. Why are we doing that? Innovation? Why don't we take the handcuffs off the public schools, if that's our concern? Public charters are only public for the purpose of getting our public taxpayer dollars and putting them in someone's pocket. Sure, they say they're not for profit, but there will be for-profit companies running these charters. And for-profit companies are worried about one thing, and it's okay when it's not our education of our kids. They're worried about the profit. Education service providers abound. There's two major players in the virtual charter schools, and you're going to get both of them in there. They're each going to be able to take 5% of our students. But I want somebody to answer, and nobody can answer this, is why do they need the same amount of money per student that our brick and mortar charter schools are going to need? Where is that extra money going to go? Just assume that they're taking the $200 million. If you assume that there's going to be one instructor for every 100 students, that's about $27 million in educational cost. That's $173 million they have to spend after they pay the teachers. Where is that money going? I don't know. I would venture to say nobody else knows either. Regardless of the party we belong to, our obligation is to be stewards of the taxpayers' money. Our constitutional obligation is to educate our children in a thorough and efficient manner. We're abdicating that with this bill. We were elected to do the right thing regardless of the party we come from, regardless of who tells us something's good and bad or bad. It's our obligation to figure out whether it's good or bad. Now, how are we going to explain if this thing goes south? Might be the greatest thing since sliced bread. But we don't know that because nobody can answer those questions. We're just going to put the money in their hands and see if it turns out okay. Sports is going to take a hit. That seems to be the most important thing in our state sometimes. But imagine 10% of your county high schools heading off to a charter school that have their own football team. There are not going to be any football teams at the rest of those high schools that's any worthwhile. The traditions will be lost. The parents will be in an uproar of those that are left behind. You can't play for your own high school. I'm not sure, at least I haven't heard yet from council, whether you can even play back at your old school if you go to a charter school. There will be less money for facilities, less money for uniforms, less coaches, less money for travel. How are you going to respond to your constituents, Mr. President, when they ask you what happened to that money? No one knows exactly what's going to happen. If it goes bad, how will we respond? Now, a no vote on this bill will allow us to do something. It'll allow us to go back and recraft this bill with some proper limitations. I understand that the majority wants charter schools. I understand you're going to get them. I understand we've got an alternative certification body that's going to certify charter schools even though the county school boards and the state school board refused. We're going to get charter schools. But let's do it in a common sense fashion. Let's fix this bill before it ends in a bad story that West Virginia can't recover from. We can't afford $4 billion. We can't afford $500 million. Mr. President, I strongly recommend a no vote on this bill.